Picture this. It's March 6, 1933. You wake up, grab coffee, and head to the bank to withdraw cash. You may need to pay rent. Maybe you need groceries. Doesn't matter. Because when you get there, the doors are locked. Not just your bank. Every bank. In every city, across the entire country. And here's the kicker. Nobody knows when they're going to open again. This actually happened. And what did the banks do during those 4 days of darkness? It changed the American financial system forever. But here's what they don't teach you in history class. The real reason they had to close wasn't just about stopping bank runs. It was about hiding something that, once you understand it, will completely change how you see money. Today, we're diving into the bank holiday of 1933, the 4 days that exposed the greatest magic trick in modern finance. And by the end of this video, you'll see why some people say that bank holiday never really ended. Let's set the scene. It's early 1933, and America is in full-blown crisis mode. The Great Depression has been crushing the country for 3 years. Unemployment is at 25%. Families are losing their homes. Bread lines stretch around city blocks. And people are scared. But nothing, and I mean nothing, scared people more than the thought of losing their savings. See, back then, there was no FDIC insurance. No government guarantee that your money is safe. If your bank failed, your life savings could vanish overnight. Poof, gone, and banks were failing everywhere. In 1930, 1,300 banks collapsed. So people did the only rational thing. They panicked. They lined up by the thousands to withdraw their money. Not because they needed it that day, but because they were terrified that if they didn't get it out right now, it would disappear. These were called bank runs, and they were contagious. When people saw a line forming at one bank, they'd rush to their own bank and start withdrawing too. Fear spread faster than wildfire. Here's the thing about bank runs, they create their own reality. A perfectly healthy bank can be destroyed in hours, simply because people believe it's in trouble. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, except instead of prophecy, it's pure financial terror. By the time Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office on March 4, 1933, the entire American banking system was on the verge of total collapse. States had already started declaring their own bank holidays, basically forced closures to stop the bleeding. But it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with a beach umbrella. Roosevelt knew he had to act fast. Within 48 hours of taking office, he did something unprecedented, something that sounds almost dictatorial when you really think about it. He closed every single bank in America. Sunday, March 5, 1933, Roosevelt's first full day as president. He calls an emergency meeting with his advisors. The message is clear: the banking system is imploding, and if they don't do something radical immediately, the entire American economy will collapse. At 1 a.m. on Monday, March 6th, Roosevelt issued Presidential Proclamation 2039. He declares a 4-day national bank holiday under the Trading with the Enemy Acta, World War I law that was supposed to be used against, actual enemies. But desperate times, right? When Americans woke up that Monday morning, every bank in the country was closed. Not just commercial banks. The New York Stock Exchange shut down too. The Chicago Board of Trade closed. It was a complete financial freeze. Now imagine living through this. Remember, this is 1933. No credit cards. No Venmo. No Apple Pay. Cash was king, and suddenly you couldn't get cash. You couldn't cash checks. You couldn't access your money at all. People tried to adapt. Some businesses accepted IOUs. Others created their own script, basically homemade currency. In Tenino, Washington, they printed money on thin slices of wood. Wood! Communities had to get creative because the normal financial system had just stopped. But here's where it gets interesting. Roosevelt didn't just close the banks to stop the panic. That was the official story, sure. But during those 4 days of darkness, something else was happening behind those locked doors. The banks were being examined, investigated, audited. And what the examiners found exposed the dirty secret at the heart of American banking. So what were the banks actually doing during the shutdown? Treasury officials, bank examiners, and federal agents were going through the books of thousands of banks, trying to figure out which ones were actually solvent and which ones were zombies walking around pretending to be alive. But to understand what they discovered, we need to talk about fractional reserve banking. And I promise, this is going to blow your mind. Here's a question. When you deposit $1,000 in your bank account, where does that money go? You probably think it sits in a vault somewhere with your name on it, right? Like a safe deposit box made of money. Wrong. The bank takes your $1,000 and immediately loans out most of it. Let's say they keep $100 and loan out $900. Now here's where it gets weird. That $900 gets deposited in someone else's account, maybe a business's account. And what does their bank do? Keeps $90 and loans out $810 and on and on and on. This is fractional reserve banking. Banks only keep a fraction of deposits on hand. The rest gets loaned out, creating new money in the process. It's financial multiplication. In the 1920s, banks were playing this game fast and loose. Reserve requirements were minimal, sometimes as low as 10% or less. That means for every dollar you deposited, the bank might only keep a dime actually available. Now think about what happens during a bank run. If everyone shows up demanding their money at once, the bank physically doesn't have it. It's been loaned out to buy houses, start businesses, and invest in the stock market. The money exists on paper, in ledgers and loan agreements. But in your hand right now, it's not there. This is the terrifying truth the 1933 bank holiday exposed. Your money in the bank isn't really there. It's an IOU, a promise, a collective agreement that we all pretend is the same as actual money. And in March 1933, Americans stopped pretending. When the examiners went through the books during those 4 days, they found that hundreds of banks were completely insolvent. The money was gone, loaned out to borrowers who couldn't pay it back, invested in stocks that had crashed, evaporated into the ether of the Great Depression. About 1/3 of all banks never reopened after the holiday. Think about that. Thousands of banks and all the deposits inside them just ceased to exist. On March 13, 1933, after 4 days of financial darkness, the banks started reopening. But not all at once. Only the banks that passed inspection, that could prove they had enough reserves, got permission to open their doors. Roosevelt went on the radio the night before in the first of his famous fireside chats. About 60 million people tuned in. He explained what had happened, why he'd closed the banks, and most importantly, he told people it was safe to deposit their money again. "I can assure you," Roosevelt said, "that it is safer to keep your money in a reopened bank than under the mattress." And you know what? It worked. People believed him. When the banks reopened, instead of more runs, people actually deposited money. Within weeks, more than $1 billion flowed back into the banking system. But Roosevelt's magic trick wasn't just good PR. Real reforms followed. Within days, Congress passed the Emergency Banking Act, giving the federal government power to regulate and oversee banks. A few months later, the Glass-Steagall Act separated commercial banking from investment banking. And most importantly, the FDIC was created, federal deposit insurance that guaranteed your money was safe up to a certain amount. These reforms rebuilt trust in the banking system. They created guardrails to prevent the reckless behavior that had caused the crisis in the first place. Problem solved, right? Banks are safe now. Everything's fine. Well, not exactly. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Fractional reserve banking didn't go away. We just made it safer, more regulated. But the fundamental structure, the fact that banks don't actually keep your money, that stayed the same. Today, banks in the US are required to keep reserve requirements, but here's something wild. Since March 2020, the Federal Reserve has reduced the reserve requirement ratio to 0%. That's right, 0. Banks are technically not required to keep any reserves against their deposits. Now, don't panic. They still keep reserves because of other regulations and risk management. But that 0% requirement tells you something important. The whole system still runs on confidence, on trust, on the collective belief that the money in your account is really there. And every so often, that belief gets tested. Remember 2008? Bear Stearns? Lehman Brothers? The financial crisis. What was it? A modern bank run. Not people lining up on the street, that's old-fashioned 2008. It was institutional investors, hedge funds, and other banks refusing to lend to each other overnight because they didn't trust that the borrower would survive until morning. The system nearly collapsed. And what did the government do? They stepped in with bailouts, guarantees, and emergency lending. They did what Roosevelt did in 1933. They stopped the panic by promising the money was safe. Or how about March 2023? Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate, Signature Bank. In the span of a few days, 3 major banks failed. Why? Classic bank run dynamics. Depositors got spooked, tried to withdraw their money all at once, and the banks didn't have enough liquid assets to cover it. The money was invested in bonds and loans that couldn't be sold quickly enough. The FDIC stepped in, and the government guaranteed all deposits, even those above the $250,000 insurance limit. Once again, the system was stabilized by government intervention. Seeing a pattern here? Now let's talk about something that might sound familiar: circuit breakers. In 1988, after the 1987 stock market crash, regulators introduced circuit breakers for the stock market. These are automatic shutdowns that trigger when markets fall too fast. If the S&P 500 drops 7% in a day, trading halts for 15 minutes, drop 13%, another halt, drop 20%. The market closes for the rest of the day. Sound familiar? It's basically a bank holiday for the stock market. The official reason is to prevent panic selling. Give traders time to calm down and let cooler heads prevail. And sure, that makes sense. But that's the question. If the market needs to be fair and free, why do we need an emergency break? The answer is the same as 1933, because the system is fragile, because it runs on confidence. And when confidence breaks, the whole thing can collapse in hours. We saw this during the COVID crash in March 2020. Circuit breakers triggered multiple times. Trading halted. The market was in free fall. And what happened? The Federal Reserve stepped in with trillions in emergency lending and asset purchases. They basically said, "We will not let the system fail." Here's what's wild. We've normalized this. We just accept that occasionally, the authorities need to hit pause on the financial system to prevent collapse. Bank holidays, circuit breakers, trading halts, emergency bailouts. It's all the same playbook. Roosevelt's 4-day bank holiday wasn't a one-time emergency measure. It was a preview of how modern finance operates. When things get scary, we stop the game, stabilize the system, and restart when everyone has calmed down. The bank holiday never really ended, it just evolved. So what does all this mean for you sitting here in 2025 watching this video? First, understand that your money in the bank is safe, but not because it's sitting in a vault. It's safe because the government guarantees it. The FDIC insurance is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And if a crisis happens that threatens the banking system, history shows the government will intervene. But second, and this is important, that intervention has limits. In 1933, thousands of banks failed and depositors lost their money. Today, we have better protections, but the system still relies on trust and government backing. So what can you do? Diversify. Don't keep all your money in one bank. Understand FDIC limits $250,000 per depositor, per bank, per account category. If you have more than that, spread it around. Stay informed. Pay attention to bank health, financial news, and warning signs. In 2023, people who were paying attention got their money out of Silicon Valley Bank before it collapsed. Those who weren't paying attention, they had a very stressful weekend. And finally, understand that cash isn't the only form of money. Investments, real estate, even cryptocurrency, these are all ways to hold value outside the traditional banking system. I'm not telling you to stuff money under your mattress or buy gold bars like a doomsday prepper. But understanding how fragile the system can be should inform how you manage your finances. The 1933 bank holiday taught us that money is a social construct. It works because we all agree it works. And when that agreement breaks down, the people in charge will do whatever it takes to restore it, even if that means shutting down the entire financial system for a few days. So let's bring it all together. In March 1933, Franklin Roosevelt did something that sounds almost impossible today. He closed every bank in America for 4 days. The official reason was to stop bank runs and restore confidence. But the deeper truth was that those 4 days exposed the greatest illusion in modern finance, that the money in your bank account isn't really there. Fractional reserve banking means banks operate on a promise, not a pile of cash. And when people stop believing in that promise, the system can collapse in hours. That's what happened in 1933, it's what happened in 2008, and it's what happened in 2023. The bank holiday of 1933 created the template for modern financial crisis management. When panic threatens the system, the authorities hit pause. Circuit breakers, trading halts, emergency lending, it's all descended from Roosevelt's 4-day shutdown. And here's the thing, it works, most of the time. The system has survived because governments have repeatedly stepped in to guarantee that your money is safe, that the banks will open tomorrow, and that the market will keep functioning. But really understanding how fragile it all is, that's power. It means you can make smarter decisions about your money. It means you won't panic when the next crisis hits. And trust me, there will be a next crisis. There always is. The bank holiday that changed everything didn't just happen in 1933, it's happening right now. In slow motion, every time regulators step in to prevent the next meltdown. The banks closed 92 years ago. But in a way, we're all still waiting for them to fully reopen. If this video made you think differently about money, banks, or how the financial system really works, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories they don't teach you in school. And here's a question to leave you with. If you woke up tomorrow and all the banks were closed again, would you be ready? Would you even know what to do? Think about it. And I'll see you in the next one.